Some women walk into a room and disappear. Angela Hill was one of them, until the day she stepped into a forgotten basement and uncovered a truth so powerful, it shook a legacy built on silence and secrets. He called her just the maid, but she was so much more. And that old safe, the one no one could open, it was waiting for her. Angela stood at the threshold of the Milton Estates basement, a place whispered about in the staff quarters but rarely visited. It was a world beneath the opulence. Damp stone walls, rusted shelving, and an air so still it felt preserved in time. A single bulb flickered overhead, casting jittery shadows across the dust-thick floor. Cobwebs swayed like silent sentinels in the corners. The scent was unmistakable. Aged wood, mildew, and something else. Something forgotten. Just grab the old linens and don't go snooping. Edward Milton had snapped that morning from the top of the stairs. He hadn't even looked at her. Seemed basements full of junk and memories nobody wants. Angela had nodded like always, adjusting her gloves, the latex snapping softly over her wrist. But today, something was different. She wasn't just cleaning, not anymore. Each step she took sent a puff of dust spiraling into the stale air. She scanned the space methodically. Old trunks, yellowed newspapers, furniture draped in sheets. Her hands paused on an antique bureau when her eye caught something in the far corner. Metal, industrial, hidden beneath years of neglect and a collapsed shelf. Angela moved toward it slowly, her heart tightening with each step. There it was. A safe, massive, time-worn, with a digital keypad corroded at the edges. It looked like it hadn't been touched in decades. Her breath caught. It couldn't be. She knelt, brushing her fingers gently across its face. The keypad blinked, alive somehow, and there, almost invisible, scrawled into the metal with something sharp, were 3 faint numbers. 38, 42, 17, the combination. That exact series had been burned into her memory years ago when she'd stumbled across a confidential file during her brief tenure as a junior crypto analyst at Mariner Bank. The file belonged to a man named James Milton, Edward's estranged brother, her father. She had only been 23 at the time. Too new to question, too invisible to matter, but she remembered that file and the number. She'd never told a soul. Angela's fingers trembled as she keyed in the sequence. One number at a time, slow, deliberate. She almost didn't expect it to work. But then, click. The sound was soft, like a breath finally exhaled after years of holding. The door creaked open, dust billowing out as if the safe itself was sighing. Inside, in meticulous order, were folders bound in leather, manila envelopes yellowed with age, and photographs that made her freeze. On top was an image of a man with kind eyes and dark hair, the same image that sat in a cracked frame on her mother's nightstand for years. The man she was told had died somewhere far away. James Milton. Her father. Angela rose to her feet, clutching the documents to her chest, when the sound of feet thundered above her. Then a voice. Sharp. Urgent. What the hell is that sound? Edward. Moments later, his shadow filled the stairwell. He descended quickly, the weight of him making the old wood groan. When he reached the bottom and saw her, saw the safe open, his face went from confusion to rage to something worse. Fear. No one's opened that safe in decades, he growled, his voice cracking. How did you... What are you doing? Angela didn't answer right away. She turned to face him, The man who'd ignored her existence for years. The man who'd barked orders without ever learning her name. She looked at him the way only someone who knew truth could. "I'm not just the maid, Mr. Milton," she said quietly. "I'm Angela Hill. Hill Milton, actually. James Milton was my father, your brother." Silence clamped down on the room. Angela didn't flinch. "You erased him," she continued. "From the family, from the business, from the will. You made sure no one would remember, but the safe remembered." Edward looked like he'd been punched. His jaw opened and closed, but no words came. "He left these," she said, lifting a worn envelope. "Original legal documents, a will, stock records, and letters, hundreds of letters. Ones he sent you. Ones you never answered." Edward staggered back a step and lowered himself onto a cracked stool like his legs couldn't hold him. "He was dead," he murmured. "He left." Angela stepped forward. "He was driven away, cut out because he married my mother, because she wasn't white. You and your father made sure he'd never come back, and now you pretend he never existed." He shook his head weakly. "You don't understand." "I understand everything," Angela cut in. "I've worked here for 5 years. You never even noticed. That's how sure you were of your power. But the law doesn't forget. And neither do I." She dropped one of the documents onto the table in front of him. A notarized letter of inheritance, with his signature. "I already called the lawyers," she said. "Half of this estate belongs to my father's bloodline, and that's me." Edward slumped in silence, the weight of his legacy collapsing around him like dust from the shelves above. He didn't argue. He couldn't. Angela turned and walked past him, papers in hand, each step sweeping a trail through the dust, a line between who she was and who she would never be again. Edward Milton had always believed in control. Control of the company. Control of the narrative. Control of the people who lived beneath his roof and breathed his air. But as he sat in the basement, staring at the open safe, at the ghost of his brother reaching out through decades of sealed steel and silence, he felt something unfamiliar. Powerlessness. Angela hadn't raised her voice. She hadn't cried, or begged, or threatened. She simply told the truth, and that, more than anything, had broken him. Upstairs, footsteps echoed. Lawyers, no doubt. His phone had started buzzing 10 minutes ago and hadn't stopped since. He didn't move, didn't answer, couldn't. The house that had always obeyed him now listened to someone else. Angela stood in the study now, the safe contents carefully arranged across the long mahogany desk. Legal teams had arrived shortly after her call, 2 representatives from Milton and Gray, the original family firm, and a third from a separate agency she had contacted herself. Blackstone Legal Recovery, a team that specialized in inheritance disputes with generational complications. They weren't interested in gossip, only the facts, and Angela had them all. She sat in Edward's old leather chair, not because it was symbolic, though it was, but because it gave her the full view of the library. Every inch of the room once whispered his legacy. Today, it whispered hers. "Let the record show," one of the Blackstone attorneys announced, "that Angela Hill Milton is presenting an original signed inheritance document, dated 7 months prior to James Milton's official disappearance from the family records." He didn't say expulsion, but Angela heard it anyway. One of the Milton family lawyers cleared his throat. "If I may, the will was revised after that date. Mr. Edward Milton was the executor. The newer version was unsigned." Angela interrupted calmly. She pushed another folder forward and unfiled. No legal force, notarized, but never registered. The man blinked. I checked the registry myself, she added. I may have started my career cleaning fingerprints off monitors, but I used to decode bank fraud for a living. I know how to read signatures and how to tell when they were forged. There was a silence that felt like the room holding its breath. Finally, the Milton attorney nodded slowly. We will need to advise our client. Please do, she said coolly. He's in the basement. Upstairs, sunlight spilled through stained glass windows, painting fractured rainbows across the tile. The house had always been beautiful, but now it felt like a stage set. Too perfect, too rehearsed. Angela wandered into the hallway, pausing at a gilded portrait of Richard Milton, Edward and James's father. The patriarch, cold eyes. A gaze that looked past you, never at you. She stood in front of him for a moment. Then, crack, she pulled the frame down. Behind it, hidden in the wall, was a small square panel. She pressed on it gently. A compartment slid open with a metallic sigh. Inside, an old fountain pen and a stack of sealed envelopes. Each one was labeled, "To be opened by James only." Angela's breath caught. She touched the top one, then the next. Her name was on the final envelope. Handwritten, slightly faded. Angela Grace Hill. Her hands shook as she took it out. She walked to the staircase, sat on the steps, and broke the seal. My dearest daughter, if you are reading this, then somehow truth has found its way back into that house. You may not know me, not truly, but I knew you. Every letter your mother wrote, every photo she sent, I kept. Your smile lit up rooms I never got to walk through. But I saw you grow. They told me I had to choose, them or you. And I chose wrong, Angie. I should have fought harder. I should have stayed, but I never stopped watching, never stopped hoping. You were born into a world that tried to erase your name, but names are just ink. You are fire. If you ever come back here, don't come for revenge. Come for justice, for what was always yours, for the silence they gave your mother, for the legacy they tried to bury. And if you open the safe, tell Edward I forgive him. That was always the hardest part. But you're stronger than hate. And he needs to see that. Love always. Dad. Angela didn't realize she was crying until a tear hit the edge of the page. She folded the letter and pressed it to her heart. Behind her, the front door creaked open. One of the Milton estate staff, a young man in his 20s, peeked in, unsure. Ms. Hill? He asked, his voice tentative. There's media outside, a lot of them. And someone said they recognized you from your banking days? Angela wiped her cheek and stood. Tell them I'll give a statement, she said. In 20 minutes. Yes, ma'am. He disappeared, and Angela looked around once more. This house, this fortress of omission, had always pretended she was invisible. Not anymore. Back in the basement, Edward hadn't moved. His hand rested on his cane, knuckles white. He didn't look up when she entered, just asked, in a voice far older than the man who'd barked at her that morning. How long have you known? Angela took her time answering. Long enough to know that everything you built sits on a cracked foundation, she said, and long enough to know how to rebuild it. He gave a dry laugh. You think anyone will believe you? You were the maid. You cleaned my floors. No, she replied, voice steady. I was the maid. Today, I'm your equal. Tomorrow, I'll be your replacement. Edward's eyes finally met hers. There was a tremble in them, not of anger, but recognition. She looked too much like James, too much like the truth. Angela stepped forward, held out the letter. It's from him, she said. He forgave you. Edward stared at the paper. Didn't take it. Angela laid it gently on the bench beside him. Write it when you're ready, she said, and turned to leave. He didn't call after her. He didn't have to. Angela stood on the estate balcony 20 minutes later, facing a sea of cameras and journalists and murmuring voices. Behind her, lawyers drafted paperwork. Inside, history was being corrected. A reporter shouted, Ms. Hill, do you have any comment on how it feels to go from housekeeping staff to heir to the Milton fortune? Angela smiled, just barely. I'm not here for a fortune, she said. I'm here to restore a name, and no one's going to sweep it under a rug ever again. The shutters clicked. The questions flew. Angela answered only one more. Are you staying? She turned toward the house, toward the legacy, toward the name carved above the door. Milton Manor. No, she said. I'm taking over. They say you can't inherit dignity, that it must be earned, word by word, choice by choice. But they were wrong, because Angela Hill didn't just inherit a fortune. She inherited the fight, the fire, and a family name that had once been buried in ash. Now she was ready to light a match of her own. 3 days had passed. Edward Milton hadn't left his room since the lawyers delivered the formal papers, ones that bore Angela's full name beside his under the column labeled Legal Successor. The house that once echoed with his orders now ticked with the precise movements of hired counsel, document runners, and estate appraisers. Even the staff walked differently, some cautious, some smiling behind closed doors. Angela noticed it all. She noticed everything. She sat in the Milton Library, her library now, beneath shelves of inherited lies and unread truths, the scent of old books mixed with leather and ambition. Her father's files were stacked in front of her, each one heavier than gold. But what drew her in wasn't the deeds or the equity transfers. It was the letters, his voice, his hope. There was one she couldn't stop reading, one her father had written 2 years before his death. Sometimes I wonder, if I had walked back into that house, would they have seen me as a man or a threat? I feared they'd choose the latter. I hope one day someone stronger than me walks in through the front door without flinching. Someone with my blood. Someone who doesn't knock. Angela folded the page. She hadn't knocked. She'd arrived with a mop and gloves, with silence and patience. And now she had keys to every room. She met with the estate's chief financial advisor that afternoon, Derek Klein, sharp-suited and slow to blink. You've officially been recognized as co-owner of Milton Holdings, he said, flipping through a thick binder. But I'd be remiss if I didn't ask. Do you actually intend to take an active role? Most heirs prefer a quieter position. Angela raised an eyebrow. Did Edward ask you to say that? Klein gave a practiced smile. I serve the seat, and right now, you're in it. Good. Then here's my first directive. I want an audit. Full. Transparent. Start with the foreign contracts and hiring practices. I want names, salaries, gaps, patterns. The man's smile faded. You're looking for something. I'm looking for everyone who was denied what was theirs, like my father, like me. She stood. Oh, and schedule a press conference. This Friday. We're not sweeping the truth under marble floors anymore. Downstairs, in a room Edward once used as a private smoking lounge, the air felt heavier. Angela entered without knocking. He was there, slouched in a velvet chair, brandy untouched, shadows collecting under his eyes. She didn't offer a greeting. He didn't expect one. "You could have destroyed me," he said after a while. "Told the press everything." Angela leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. "You destroyed yourself the day you erased your brother." His jaw tightened. "You don't understand how it was. Back then," she cut in, "you let racism wear a dinner jacket and sit at the family table." A long silence followed. Angela stepped forward and placed a box on the table. Simple, unadorned. Inside it, the letters James had written to Edward. Edward stared at it like it burned. "I read them all," she said. "He forgave you and everyone, until the last. I didn't ask for his forgiveness." "No," she said softly. "But you needed it, didn't you?" Edward didn't answer. Didn't move. He just stared at the box like it might bite. Angela turned to leave but paused at the door. "You were right about one thing," she said over her shoulder. "This house is full of ghosts, but I'm not one of them. I came back to live." By Friday, the headlines were already shifting. MAID turns millionaire. Hidden heiress takes legal control of Milton Empire. Truth from the basement. The forgotten brother and the inheritance that changed everything. And Angela, she was calm. Her press conference was held in the very ballroom where she used to mop footprints off marble. The irony wasn't lost on her. Dressed in a tailored navy suit, elegant, sharp, unyielding, Angela stood before the press with the poise of someone who had waited her whole life not to be noticed, but to be heard. "Good morning," she began. "My name is Angela Hill Milton. For years, I cleaned this house. I was called just the maid. But what I really was the daughter of James Milton. A man this family tried to forget. Camera flashes lit the air like lightning. I'm not here for revenge. I'm here for correction, for reconciliation. My father wasn't just a brother. He was a builder, a creator, and most importantly, a father who never stopped believing in his daughter." She held up one of his letters. "This was left for me, hidden, sealed, like so many truths, but secrets don't last, and silence is not safety." She paused, then looked straight at the front row, where Edward sat in the shadows, watching. "I intend to run this company with integrity, with transparency, and with every person in mind who was ever told they weren't enough because of their skin, their name, or their story." Applause broke through. Not loud at first, but growing. Angela stepped back from the mic, her father's letter still in hand. Later that evening, as twilight kissed the edges of the estate, she walked the empty halls. She ended up in the grand foyer, staring at the large crest carved above the fireplace. Milton. Strength through legacy. She stood there for a long time, then pulled out a small brass plaque she had ordered that morning. She placed it just below the family crest. It read, "In memory of James Milton, father, brother, visionary, forgotten by force, remembered by fire." Angela stepped back. For the first time since she found that safe, she let herself exhale. The house didn't feel like a cage anymore. It felt like a beginning.